Hello everyone, and on today's video we're going to be following up on our series of arrivals and departures and instrument procedures by taking a look at specific procedures. And in this case we're going to be looking at an NDB approach. Now NDB approaches are a little different from a lot of the other approaches that we're going to be taking a look at, in that not only is it considered a non-precision approach, even though it's sort of precise, it is probably the most interesting approach in the sense that you really have to be able to keep track and be comfortable with ADF technology in order to go ahead and use it properly. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we're going to do today. So what we're going to do is we're going to take off from Carthage. We're going to go out about a minute or two, turn ourselves around, and then we're going to fly this approach. Now, because an ADF/NDB does not provide us with any course information, we're going to have to derive this using some of the features on the G1000. So we're going to take off. We're going to turn around. We're going to proceed direct to Carthage NDB. That's Tree 2, Romeo Papa Foxtrot. We'll go ahead and check that too. We're then going to proceed out a couple minutes. We're going to do a course reversal. This course reversal is going to involve us flying out at a heading of 134, turning around and coming back at tree 14. Isn't that pi? And then afterwards, we're going to re-intersect. Again, there's no magical glide slope or localizer or anything here, so we're going to have to use the actual tools that we have available to figure out when we have realigned with the runway. Now, to make things extra complicated for us, when we initially cross this point, if you want to look at it from the side, we're going to be proceeding along this heading down to an altitude, then turning around and then proceeding down even more until we actually find the runway. So we have a lot going on here. So what do we need to figure out? So first things first, we definitely want to know what the frequency of the NDB is, which is going to be Tree 2. Next thing we know, we're going to be interested in our minimums. We have two different sets of minimums here. Basically, you have your type of aircraft, A, B, C, D at the top. Notice type D is missing because we don't really land airliners here. It wouldn't be suggested. Basically, it tells us we have a 1,000-foot altitude with a 1-mile visibility. Anything less than that obviously gets interesting. Notice as your aircraft gets bigger, your minimum visibility starts to increase, and you can actually have a 2.25-mile visibility here, which is a tremendous amount of distance, given that, again, this is not the world's most precise approach. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and actually fly this and see what happens. All right, so we're back here. We got the Beechcraft Bonanza today. We'll give everything a little wiggle to make sure it's working properly. You would not want that surprise. So I've gone ahead and set up my regular clouds here. We'll go ahead and tweak that in a second. So let's go down to our ADF and DMA. We're going to go ahead and tune in our frequency. Remember, it's Tree 2. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to set in Tree 2. Tree. I'd like to plant a Tree 2. Press enter once, press enter twice. Now that I've done that, I'm going to come down here to where it says CDI and ignore that because it doesn't do anything. Instead, I'm going to come over to where it says PFD, and you're going to see bearing 1. I'm going to go ahead and select that. And now you can see that we have no data because we're looking for the VOR. Press it again, press it again, press it again. Bingo! Now we are in business. So what this does is this little blue arrow points where the NDB actually is. In this case, if I went to visualize it, it's actually sitting right over here on the side of the runway. So that way we know that no matter where we face, that arrow will always point in the correct direction. Now, kind of irritatingly here, we've got that other CDI kind of in our way. Usually you can actually shut this off, but in this case, I'm just going to pick a random one and just twist it so it gets out of our way because I don't really want it to be blocking my view here. All right, looks pretty good. So we're going to do an altitude of 2,500 feet. So I'm going to go into my altitude now. I'm going to go set that up initially. We're going to do our descent once we get airborne. Another really important thing that we're going to want to kind of keep an eye out for, let me go ahead and give myself a few RPM here, is I'm going to make sure my timer's ready to go because we're definitely going to need this today. And I'm going to make sure it's just kind of ready to go. And I am all set. Let's go ahead and get rolling. So like I said, we're going to take off following runway heading. We're going to turn ourselves around and attempt this approach. Let's do it. Off we go. Now, it's very difficult to get an autopilot to fly an NDB approach on account of the fact that there's a little bit too many variables. That being said, in a lot of cases, you can actually use your GPS to fly most of it, or basically almost do a coupled approach if you want to think about it kind of another way. I got a little turbulence today. I'm not flying under complete instrument conditions so that I can make sure you can see exactly what I'm doing above the ground here. And off we go. So the first thing I want to do is, getting bounced around pretty good today, but that's exactly what I expected. I'm actually going to level this off a little bit here. Flip on the automatic pilot, make my life a little bit simpler while I try to get everything all set up here. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and start my timer once we get up to about, let's say, 1,000 feet, and then we'll go ahead and turn around and actually fly the approach. We'll leave this visible as well to make it a little bit easier to see what I'm doing, and you can see the NDB station is actually visible on our chart. If we wanted to, we could cheat and shut all this off, but that'll be okay for today. All right, 1,000 feet. Let's go ahead and start my timer. Once that hits a minute, we'll go ahead and start leveling off and actually do the approach. So while we're climbing, let's go ahead and take a look back at the approach real quick. You can see that we're currently basically just took off. We're kind of cruising along here. We're going to pretend we're arriving from somewhere up here. We're going to go back, cross the NDB station. Like I said, go out about 2 minutes, do our course reversal, and then come back and see if we can find the runway. That's really all there is to it. But I do want to make sure my minimums are pre-programmed here. Again, I'm looking at 1,000 feet, so I want to make sure that's all set up as well. So pop back over here real quick. Got about 30 seconds in. We'll do our reversal in just a moment. Man, this is a fast aircraft for this kind of a thing. All right, we'll cruise down towards its minimums. We're going to just dial that number in real quick. These are pretty high minimums. Dun 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 dun. Got it. Enter, enter. All right, we just crossed a minute. We're going to go ahead and turn the aircraft around. And now what we're going to try to do is approach the NDB directly. Now remember, this little blue arrow here is pointing towards that NDB station is. So we're just going to fly to it until we cross over the top of it. Now once we've crossed over the top of it, we'll be in a great position to go ahead and start our actual approach procedure. Think of that as kind of the starting point. Once we cross it, we'll make our heading 359. We'll go about 2 minutes or so, and then we'll go ahead and take it from there. Go back up to the top here. Going to go stop this because we're going to need it again. Reset. And we are looking pretty good. I'm going to press the altitude hold. Actually, altitude hold should engage automatic. Nope, it did not. There we go. Come back down. We'll start getting our aircraft all set up. I'm going to reduce my power first, and then I'm going to reduce my pitch next. Looking for about 2,500 RPM. I'll fix my altitude in a moment. I'm not too concerned with it right now. And it looks pretty good. A little bit more, a little bit more. All right, nice. You can see that the NDB is shifting a little bit to our left. We're going to kind of swing a little bit. We do have a little wind today. I highly recommend flying these with wind because it makes things much more interesting. Actually, this is good news because the wind is actually pushing us this way, which means if I point the aircraft slightly to the right of where I need to be, I'll be successful. Now, when we cross the NDB and we start flying our initial approach here, we're going to go ahead and make sure that we do the opposite correction because remember, we're going to be traveling in the other direction. So again, you can see I'm actually pushing slightly to the right of where I need to be. And again, because of this incredible G1000, we can see almost everything anyway. So it's how effective do you think we can possibly get here? Which is kind of a bummer. All right, again, just checking to make sure everything looks good. All right, we know we crossed the NDB station the moment this needle flips. We're going to know that we crossed it in just a moment. I know my pros are looking over here on the right, and they can see very clearly, but we're going to ignore that, and we're just going to watch this needle. And we're going to start a 2-minute timer as soon as this flips. Watch this. Oh, did you see it? All right, now we need to make my heading 359. So I'm going to grab onto my little heading now. I'm going to set it to 359. I'm sorry, 179er. Thank you. Perfect. Now we're going to do 2 minutes in this direction. And we're also going to start descending. Descending, you say? Remember, we just crossed here, so now we're doing this. So now we got to come down to 2,000 feet. So let's go ahead and take a look at how things are going over here. Looks pretty good. Reduce my altitude to 2,000. Looks good. We're going to do a vertical speed. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to very cautiously pull the throttle back just a teeny tiny bit. Now notice that needle to the NDB is not corresponding to the heading we're currently traveling at. Don't worry about that. So next what we're going to have to do, and I'll go pop back over here real quick. We're going along this way. We're going to proceed here, and then we're going to take a left turn to 134, and then bring a giant right turn at 314 until we're relined up with where we need to go. So let's continue my little descent here. Again, like I said, about a 2-minute descent. Now, if you remember, we're doing 500 feet per minute, so hypothetically, we should be crossing that magic point at the same time. Now, what you're really doing here, and you can't really see this visually because I don't have a really good thing for airspaces, is we're basically trying to stay close enough to the airport that we're in protected area while we're flying here. All right, our next turn is going to take us out to 134. Keep in mind, you should always be compensating for the wind, which in this case is a perfect crosswind right now. So really what we need to be is not 179er. We should be slightly to the right of 179er to compensate for this wind to not push us too far off course. All right, looking pretty good. We've got a minute 36. We're going to be a little late on our descent, but that's perfectly fine. So the moment my 2 minutes is out, I'm going to go ahead and take myself a nice little left turn. Theoretically, you're not supposed to exceed 10 nautical miles away from whatever that initial point was. So you have to do your timing very cautiously. Obviously, at 150, we're doing almost 3 nautical miles per minute. 2 minutes worth is about 6 nautical miles. All right, let's do it. So now we're going to go to tree 14. Oh, 134. I knew I was going to do that. 134. Remember, at any time, you can always take over and grab this. So this is going to be what they call the course reversal procedure. So if I go flip back over here real quickly, we went to this point. Now we're going to be traveling along here despite my incompetence. Then we're going to take that long turn. Once you get into position, you should be traveling about a minute in that direction. Turn around, proceed another minute back. But remember, because of that headwind, it's going to take longer than a minute to actually get us back into position. But that's okay. All right, we've gone ahead and leveled ourselves off. We'll reset start. Usually whenever you do a timed maneuver with one of these types of aircraft, you're always going to be doing it based on, like I said, some kind of time or something like that. Always keep an eye on your ground speed, always keep an eye on your airspeed, everything along those lines. So we'll take a minute out real quick, and then we're going to swing back to tree 14 this time. Now, the neat thing is, if you look at the NDB right now, you can see that we're basically picking up at a funky angle behind us, which makes perfect sense. Now, we're going to show you a really cool trick in a minute. Also note that our altitude is also accurate. We're at 2,000 feet. As soon as we get lined up back with the NDB, we're going to have to start a gentle descent to get back from which we came. Now, do you remember how it took us 2 minutes to get away from the NDB? At the same speed, it should technically take 2 minutes to come back to the NDB as well. But keep in mind, things like headwinds and stuff like that can't affect us. All right, get ready. This time we got it right. Tree 14 on our mark. Get set. Do it a little early. Okay, so now what are we going to be waiting for here? This is our course reversal maneuver, by the way, also known as a procedure turn. Tree 14. Lovely. So now what we're doing is I'll switch back over to this view. I'll show you exactly where we are. We're right where my mouse is. We're basically going like this and coming straight back. So how are we going to know when the runway is at tree 59? Well, I'll show you a cool trick. See this little needle which indicates where the NDB is? We actually don't need this running right now. When this NDB needle is pointing just about at north, that means physically that NDB station is now basically straight to our north. So all we have to do now is we don't even have to time the minute back in. Although we could time the minute back in, and we will, we can just wait for this needle to be just about north and then turn to our final approach course. All right, once wings are level, we're going to go ahead and start our timer. We're looking for about a minute, but remember we have a pretty strong headwind now. Go back over to Opera Vision. So now we're kind of cruising along this line here, just like my mouse is. And we're going to be turning this right when we see that we're right about at tree 59. Time to start thinking about landing the airplane, as weird as that sounds. Do you notice how this blue needle is slowly shifting towards where we need it to be? We're actually going to turn right when it gets to tree 55 degrees, because that's going to be close enough. We have to also consider our descent. Now, if you're looking at a vertical version of this, we are basically sitting here orbiting, and now we have to start coming down in just a moment. Now remember, when you come down, it's going to be about a 3 degree, which simply means take your speed, add a 0, divide by 2 kind of a thing. But we're going to slow down before we get to that point, because then I'm going to go ripping along here. See how that needle is slowly drifting to the right? That's simply telling us that we're getting into a position where once the NDB is corresponding to the runway heading, we're pretty much all set. All right, looking pretty good, looking pretty good. I can look outside, but I really don't need to. Again, I've got no map or anything special going on here. Look at how fast that's traveling. So because of our headwind, which took a minute the first time, is now going to take longer than a minute the second time because of the fact that that wind is actually slowing us down a little bit. All right, you can see we're about tree 50, and then we're just going to come bringing this thing around. Remember, I got this heading off of here. Pop back over real quick, tree 54. We're going to have to slow down and bring us onto our final approach course in just a minute. Tree 54. Okie doke. Let's do it. So remember, it's going to be 359, but we have to compensate for the wind a little bit, so we'll do, let's say, 357. All right, time to slow down and start descending. Our minimum altitude is 1,000 feet, if you recall. Vertical speed mode on, reduce power. Set up for landing. Now, this would be a good time to go ahead and set your final timer, which hopefully you've pre-calculated. Remember, it took us 2 minutes to get out. It'll take us 2 minutes to get back. Start slowing down. Remember, we're doing 120 now, so it's actually going to take us 2.5 minutes to cover that distance. Give us a little bit more power here. All right, looking pretty good. Make sure our vertical speed is set. So we're doing 120. That's going to be about 600 feet per minute. Man, this is the least responsive throttle on Earth. And yes, I know some of you are observing the fact that you can see the runway. Ignore that for a minute. Just pretend we're following just this. So right now what we're going to do is we're going to hold our steady descent here until we cross either the minimum altitude, which we're not supposed to go beyond, or we cross our 2.5 minutes, or we cross the NDB station, which should be indicated by this needle suddenly chewing away. Now, we're actually in trouble here because if you look really carefully, we're pointing to the right of the NDB station, which also means since we have a wind coming from our left, we have to actually compensate by taking ourselves a little bit to the left more than we think we needed to. So in this case, I'm going to pull myself to about 355, and that looks pretty good as well. Again, we just continue our descent nice and relaxed, not doing anything too crazy here. I'm actually going to back my speed out just a little bit. Since we're backing our speed out a little bit, I'm going to decrease my vertical speed just a tiny bit. And now we start, actually, let's keep it what it is. And looking out the window, I can now see the airport. This is the definition of a missed approach because of the fact that we are far, far, far too steep and nasty to be able to safely land this aircraft at this time. But what we could do, of course, is do a circling approach, which we're more than close enough to do. And we'll go ahead and end this video that way. But you can see that the approach itself is actually pretty straightforward. And I was able to relocate the runway from where we were. All right, let's go ahead and do a classic circling approach. So in this case, we should have reduced our speed a little bit more aggressively. But again, ADF/NDB approaches are so rare you barely even see them anymore. Drop our next notch of flaps. For those of you who've not done a circling approach, it's basically the military equivalent of the overhead approach. So what you're going to do is you're going to fly an entire traffic pattern without losing sight of the actual runway. All right, go ahead and reduce power a little bit. Let's go ahead and do our landing checks. We have GUMPFLS. Go ahead and look at the floor real quick. Switch to the other fuel tank. Nice. All right, finish up my approach here. This is going to be a nice and tight approach. But you can see that even though it is old style approach, we were still very able to locate the runway, safely find the runway, and then land the plane. Keep in mind in the real world, what you would have been doing during the entire approach is constantly looking out the window to double check to see whether or not you've actually found the airport. Ah, now that is a military style approach, but that's okay. Normally what you would have done is seen the runway about much sooner, and you'd be able to go spin it around. But that's the basic concept of an NDB approach. Hopefully you found this video helpful. We'll be taking a look at VOR approaches, which are way more precise than these approaches next time. Go ahead and reduce the throttle a little bit. The thing kind of drift. We're not supposed to land beyond the threshold anyway. And there's where I want to put the plane on the ground. Nice. All right, folks, hopefully you found this fairly helpful. You're not going to find many NDB approaches at all. Sometimes NDBs are used, of course, to kind of enhance existing approaches, kind of provide you with a final approach fix. But again, it's nothing too crazy. Enjoy.